Let's be clear. Let's be clear. Let's be perfectly crystal transparently clear. What took place with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, meaning her saying that a woman, that Bernie said that a woman couldn't win, Sanders saying that never happened, that never took place, Elizabeth Warren getting cagey and putting it out vaguely and then not wanting to add any context, whereas the other person is adding context and explaining exactly what he said, that not believing her, that this is somehow akin to the MeToo movement. Let's be very clear. This fake scandal that Elizabeth Warren is bringing up, this Hail Mary pass to try to carve out support to damage her friend while getting some level of a sympathy vote, this has nothing to do with the MeToo movement. Nothing at all. This tweet is precious and ridiculous. Still thinking about Warren-Bernie squabble, and I have questions. Still thinking about the Warren-Bernie squabble, and I have a question to people who have accused Warren of lying. Isn't the lesson of Me Too in the last few years that we believe women and don't call them liars? No. That answer is no. Are you really saying that women should be believed as an absolute? That's utter nonsense. Here's the catch. The Me Too movement was about sexual abuse. The Me Too movement was about sexual abuse. This is not about sexual abuse. This is, I love this clip. Clean surrogate, Harvey Weinstein.
You gotta play the game. You gotta play the game.
So at least, in that little fort, you know what I mean, the cavalry can hold off.
Right. So why are you for Hillary instead of Bernie?
Well, my daughter, Emma, has really crystallized it over the last 4 weeks. She's 18 years old, and all of her girlfriends were for Bernie.
Right.
All of them. And her too. Mm-hmm. She's even for the New England Patriots, which I can't stand.
What?
No, I disinherited her.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. That's
Only Robert Kraft adopted her.
Yeah.
That's a problem. He's got more money than
He's doing well.
It's terrible.
No, I doubt that.
No, it's true. Whatever. And just she said to me that when Bernie said Hillary wasn't qualified, they took that a little sexist, just like, how could the Secretary of State, 103 countries that she visited.
Apex predator, Harvey Weinstein, the one that's being dragged to court right now, the one that they were putting federal charges on right now, the one that's cripply making it to court. My doctor said that guy needs to look at videos on how people walk on canes. He's putting it on thick. Weinstein knows his sins as he sits on this stage shucking for Hillary Clinton while calling Bernie Sanders sexist. This man has probably molested and abused more women in more flagrant ways than anybody else on the fucking planet Earth. And he's still sitting here calling Sanders sexist. They're weaponizing sexism. And I hate to tell you this, weaponizing sexism in this way undermines people who actually have real claims of sexism. It's the reason why I'm against just randomly calling people racist. Like, it's this notion that words have meanings. And if you're using this in a political way just to hit your opponent, you're undermining, you're subverting the people who actually deal with real sexism. For example, from an apex predator that's sitting here saying so. He, Harvey Weinstein, probably more than anybody else, was the inspiration of kicking off the Me Too movement. The point is that women felt alone. They could be molested at work. They could be abused at work. They could be, let's say, catcalls or these things that make them feel uncomfortable in the capacity of doing their job, especially if they're being treated as a sexual object. And it can be difficult to come out. It can be difficult, especially when you think you're by yourself. I am alone in this. I could lose my job. I could lose the only way of paying for myself. This is just something I'm going to have to endure. The point is, you're not alone. Me too. I'm also part of this. Me too. As one woman after the next start coming out for Harvey Weinstein saying, I was abused, he did this, he masturbated in a plant and made me stay there. He pushed up on me for sex. One thing after the next, and each one coming out, me too. That was the point. The point is that you're not alone. You're not suffering by yourself. You can come out and you be supported in the way that you're coming out. That, yes, to some degree, you get the benefit of the doubt. Now, I give the benefit of the doubt while not necessarily entirely believing that the guy was guilty. It depends on other things that come along with it. I can evaluate the situation based on what sounds more likely or not to be true without necessarily coming to one hard conclusion one way or the other. But the point I'm making here is the point of the Me Too thing was you're not alone. You'll be supported. If you are under assault, if you're being abused, if you're being molested, your society is paying attention. Which is why Matt Lauer got fired. Which is why when these cases started bubbling up, companies started taking somewhat of a hard-nosed tact towards dealing with those issues. Now, that's sexual abuse, sexual harassment. Elizabeth Warren is a grown-ass woman. And Elizabeth Warren had a secret or a private conversation with Sanders. There were only two people in that room. Elizabeth Warren tells somebody, and what makes it sound like a potential embellishment. Now, Sanders says, what I told her was that Sanders was a racist, Trump is a racist, sexist, homophobe, or bigot, and he's going to use that against the woman in the race. Now, it is infinitely possible that Warren embellished that or interpreted that to mean a woman can't win. The catch here is 2 days, this happened 2 years ago, 2 days before the before the debate. In the last debate before Iowa, with Warren sagging in the polls 10, 12 points in some of these polls, her trend line, you can look at it, is, I think I even have it up. You can look at it right here, Real Clear Politics. This is Warren. This is her line. Plummets. In this situation, you now use a conversation that only two people were in the room as opposition research to attack somebody that you call your friend. Now it becomes an issue in this 2 days before the debate. The only person who could have given that out was you, meaning the only person who could have told somebody else was you because there were only two people in the room. Anonymous sources leak it to CNN. Warren doesn't bury the story. She doesn't come out and say, well, look, he didn't quite say that. This insinuation that he's sexist is not quite there. I'm not participating in this. I don't want to talk about this. She didn't do that. She leaned into the story. She started fundraising off the story. At any point, she could have called Sanders. At any point, they could have talked about this over the course of the 2 years. It never came up. The meeting had been talked about before. There was nothing notable about the meeting. But now, this comes up. And again, she leans into it. If Warren was against the story coming out, Warren could have put the kibosh on that story early on. She didn't. Meaning, it's tacit approval. It makes more sense that her campaign leaked it since she's giving it tacit approval as opposed to burying the story. She gets on the debate stage. Sanders is asked. He does what he does. He says, look, this is ludicrous. I tried to get her to run in 2015. On top of trying to get her to run in 2015, 30 years ago, I was out here saying that a woman could win. And it is ludicrous to believe that Warren is going to come to me and say, I'm thinking about running for president, or can a woman win the presidency or running? Me knowing that she's basically saying she's running for president and do I think she can win? And I'm going to tell her, no, a woman can't win. I'm going to go get some coffee. It's a bizarre setup. Now, the catch becomes what was actually said. Now, the thing is, and then she does a hot mic thing where she knows the mic is on, she knows the camera is rolling, and she's like, hey, you called me a liar on national TV. Well, you called me a sexist liar when bringing this story out. At any point, you could have called me, and right now, you could have called me after this debate in order to talk about it. You could have called me in the intervening time before the debate. You didn't do that. All of this was kept above optics to ensure that the public could see what is taking place with this notion, again, of trying to ding Sanders. It basically boils down to he said, she said. Now, this is not a sexual abuse thing. These are political actors. One guy tends to be authentic. One guy tends to be honest. Rarely calls something a lie and came out in this case very strongly, that's a lie. The other woman pretended to be a Native American for like 40 years, lied about what she was doing in regards to her capacity as a corporate lawyer, lied directly to a parent that was asking her about school choice, saying her kids were in public schools. I mean, for God's sake, even the Medicare for All thing, where she kept saying, I'm for Medicare for all, I'm for Medicare for all. She puts out a plan that is clearly a public option and still calls it Medicare for all. She's flagrantly been disingenuous the entirety of this campaign. She's effectively aped Sanders. I would agree with Warren when she says wealth tax. I believe in that part. But the other stuff is just her pretending to be somebody she is not. So when you ask me, and I look at this, can I evaluate and say, I think she's lying? Yes, I think she's lying. It doesn't make sense, first of all. And in the second point, she has a history of flagrant dishonesty. MeToo is about sexual assault. So just stop. But beyond the sexual assault thing, if you're asking, why do I think she's lying? She has a history of being dishonest. He doesn't. And, you know, there are a litany of items that Warren has come up with. Did she really get fired for being pregnant? I mean, she put out 2 different stories on that particular point. She has a history. She has a problem with honesty. Is her campaign really grassroots funded? Well, at some point it was, but she took money that clearly wasn't grassroots funded and dumped into her campaign. And yes, she was going to accept money after she got out of the primary, which raises the question, why don't you just take it in the primary? Well, she doesn't take it in the primary because she wants to stand beside Sanders and pretend they're a 1-to-1. I hope you get my point. You're asking this, I suppose, sincerely, why do I think she's lying? And shouldn't, we just automatically trust women? Sarah Huckabee Sanders is not a trustworthy woman. The woman lies flagrantly. But under this model, we're supposed to just accept everything she says as being true. That's nonsense. Me Too is sexual harassment. It doesn't apply. Full stop. In regards to believing a woman just because she's a woman, A, that's sexist on its face. B, if a woman is in politics, she should be able to hold her own. If she can't hold her own, she shouldn't be in politics. And 3, she shouldn't need to be coddled in this way. 4, Warren has a history of being dishonest. And if it's between, do I believe Sanders or do I believe Warren, that choice becomes extremely easy and has nothing to do with her vagina. It has everything to do with her having a track record and a problem with honesty. I'll leave it here. I don't want to keep this long. I saw this and I was like, how are you adding in Me Too? It's almost like they're trying to wrap around sexism angle and wrap it into something that is so over the top. Washington Post said people and sources around in the meeting didn't take place. BuzzFeed comes out with an article talking about Warren's own camp trying to roll this back because they believe it's going to be disadvantageous to them if people are saying Bernie is sexist based on the story that they most likely put out. And rolls it back to a degree where it sounds like their story is closer to Sanders. Sean King comes out and says sources in her camp said Warren has a tendency to embellish and she's been telling the story in a different way each time. It's possible that somebody went to the press without Warren's knowledge. It is also possible they went to the press with her knowledge. And either way, she leaned into it. She gave her approval. Don't tell me this is a mistake. She leaned into it. Don't tell me it's an accident, that she misunderstood, or that Sanders could have somehow de-escalated. That's utter nonsense. It is not his responsibility to de-escalate something that she initiated. She's dishonest. I'm sorry. She is. Nothing to do with her being a woman. It has everything to do with being dishonest. There's a difference in those things. Like, share, and subscribe.